The 2026 Mazda CX-5 is a new era for Mazda. It's got a new design, new technology, and a giant new center screen. But Mazda is an automaker of evolution, not full revolution. So even big changes feel somewhat familiar in the new CX-5. Somewhat. This is the 2026 Mazda CX-5, a new SUV showcasing Mazda's new design language, which the company brought us out to California to test. And I'm Alanis King. Let's go for a drive and stick around for the end of this video to get this CX-5's full report card. This 2026 Mazda CX-5 is the start of the third generation of the vehicle. The car launched originally in 2012, and I think the cool thing about Mazda's modern design language is that over time, especially in these past 15 years, it has evolved. It hasn't just fully changed with new generations of vehicles. When we look at that first generation CX-5, it has that bubbly, rounded aesthetic that we were used to seeing in the 2000s with cars like the Miata. And then when we got to the second generation, it kept a similar shape, but it got more serious and had those squintier headlights. This new third generation of the CX-5 is not revolutionarily different styling-wise than the outgoing car, but it is busier, and I find this a little bizarre because the past, especially decade with Mazda, things have gotten simpler and sleeker and just more beautiful in a less busy way. But when we look at this front grille, you'll especially see that there are just more elements added. So not only do we have this grille outline right here, we have a black plate right here that almost feels like a double grille outline, and then when we look at the running lights in the headlight area, we have this like wavy pattern instead of a smooth line. To me, that adds more to the front end and it makes it busier. And I'm not totally sold on it yet, but that might just be that I'm used to the old car. The new Mazda CX-5 has also grown in comparison to the old car. The 2025 model starts at $29,050 US, and this one, which starts at $29,990 US, is 4.5 inches longer and half an inch wider than the outgoing car. The extra size on the CX-5 went to really good use. This has a 110-inch wheelbase, and when we get in the back of the car, Mazda says you get 2 inches of extra legroom and about an inch of extra headroom compared to the old CX-5. Not only that, but you'll notice that the rear doors are bigger than the outgoing ones, and they open so much wider. And you know, sometimes you see companies talk about, oh, we do this better and this better and this better, and you go, I mean, I guess. It is so obvious when I open this rear door that this is a change from so many other vehicles that I drive, because so often you open a rear door and it's just diagonal to you and it's hard to get in. This opens so wide, so you're able to put in car seats or cargo or anything else really easily back here, and then you get back here and you have quite a bit of space. I'm 5'8.5", and I fit in here very, very well. We also have some really important branding and technology updates in this new CX-5. You'll notice right here by my hand, this steering wheel no longer has a Mazda logo on it. It says just the letters that spell out Mazda. You also get that on the rear of the car. There's not a logo back there like there used to be. It says Mazda, just like this. We move to right here, and this in this top trim, which is the Premium Plus, is a 15.6-inch screen. In lower trims, you get a 12.9-inch screen, and this replaces the old Mazda infotainment system. And the old Mazda infotainment system, totally workable, it's totally fine, but it's also a product of the 2010s. You have a long, skinny screen, and then you have a little dial that you can work it with. And buried deep in that screen, we have a setting called touch screen in motion, because from the factory, you get in that car and you cannot touch the screen. It will not respond to you. You have to go deep into the settings, click touch screen in motion, and make it into a touch screen. And yes, I understand that a lot of people don't like touch screens. I get it. To have a big iPad on the dashboard is certainly something. However, with where we are currently at in technology in society, it is so much more intuitive to be poking at this screen than it is to be using a little dial right here like you did in old Mazda infotainment systems. So I get it. And yeah, our climate control buttons are gone, but we have a static bar right here on the touchscreen. All of the currently available 2026 CX-5s and all of the ones here are gas engines. They're a 2.5-liter inline four-cylinder that makes 187 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. That power goes through a 6-speed automatic transmission to all four wheels because the CX-5 has standard all-wheel drive this year. And in addition to that, we don't have the Monroney, so we don't have the exact final assembly point, but it has a J in the VIN, so it's in Japan. Something I do think is really important to mention about this 2026 CX-5 is that as of right now, as of all of the press materials I've read, there is no mention of a potential turbo variant of this CX-5. And especially in America, and especially among car enthusiasts, turbo variants of Mazda vehicles, even normal vehicles like the CX-5, are a big deal. The 2025 CX-5 has a turbocharged variant that makes 256 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. And that is the fun to drive, exciting engine that gets people going for these different models. Mazda has not mentioned a turbo yet though, and there are no turbos here with us. All Mazda has said is that a hybrid is on the way and will likely be here with a Skyactiv Z engine in 2027. Mazda currently makes 5 trims of this 2026 CX-5 with that 187 horsepower engine. The base trim is the $29,990 S trim. It comes with the base 12.9-inch infotainment screen, wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, 17-inch wheels, and manually adjustable front seats. The next trim is the Select, which starts at $31,990 and adds things like rear seat vents, auto-folding side mirrors, wireless phone charging, and wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Then comes the $34,250 Preferred trim, which adds features like 19-inch alloy wheels, roof rails, a power liftgate, heated front seats, a heated steering wheel, and power-adjustable driver's seat. The penultimate trim is the $36,900 Premium, which adds ventilated front seats, a power passenger seat, heated rear seats, ambient interior lighting, additional rear USB-C charging ports, and more. This 2026 CX-5 is the top trim, which means it starts at $38,990. That paint is $595 extra, and after options and fees, the total price of this particular CX-5 is $41,080. The $595 Soul Red Crystal paint color on this CX-5 is one of my favorite things that modern Mazda does because it is so beautiful. And I figured if I had this beautiful exterior paint color, I would wear my favorite paint color, which is my Jeff Gordon jacket from our partner, Homefield Apparel. Every time I wear this, people come up to me all day, every day, and say how much they love it. And I'm like, thank you so much. Me too. Homefield makes the coolest officially licensed apparel for all kinds of things. College sports, some pro sports, NASCAR, the Indy 500, so many different things. And every time I wear Homefield, I get so many compliments on it. So if you would like to check out Homefield, it's homefieldapparel.com, and we really appreciate Homefield for supporting our channel. We have now made it to my favorite part of any car review, which is how many Atlantises can fit in the trunk of this 2026 Mazda CX-5? Now, while I'm getting in here, I want to talk about a few things. The first is this key. This is a normal Mazda key. Pretty much every Mazda key looks like this. It's very simple, very elegant, very sleek, but I always wish that it had slightly better exterior material because it looks nice, but I do think over time, this will be very easy to scratch. In addition to that, we have some cool stuff back here. Under me right now, we have a spare tire, which is fantastic. Mazda also says that this CX-5 has a lower load floor, which is great because of the fact that when you have a lower load floor, you don't have to pick stuff up nearly as high to get it in here. And then the coolest feature I think back here is the fact that these rear seats go down like you see in a lot of normal cars. However, most normal cars have a 60-40 breakdown where 2 seats go down and then 1 seat goes down. And you can choose either 2 or 1. In here, each individual seat folds down. So I can quite literally just fold down the middle seat if I want to. And there are so many times when I go to a home improvement store and all I need to do is shove a 2x4 in the back of a car, but I have to do a 60-40 seat release. You don't have to do that in here. You can quite literally just put the middle seat down. Now, let's see how many Landises are gonna fit in here. Honestly, This is wild. I feel like two Alanuses could sit crisscross applesauce at the back right here, and then another could sit right next to them. This is a solid 3 Alanuses. It's time to drive the 2026 Mazda CX-5, and I want to talk about a few different categories here. We're going to talk about the styling and the comfort, then we'll talk about the controls, then we will talk about the actual driving experience. I want to start with styling and comfort. The outside of this car looks very Mazda. It looks very CX-5. Like I said earlier, I do think it's a little more complicated than it needs to be on the outside, and Mazda really thrives with that simplicity in styling. So I think it could be more simple, but overall, it looks good. On the inside, Mazda is so good at interiors. They're good at interior styling and they are good at interior materials. And that is also the case in here. When I feel these materials, they are soft touch. They look nice. They're not over the top. I think they will age well as well. The only thing I don't really love that's immediately in my sightline is this center console area. The material that's around the shifter right here is just this kind of semi-gloss black plastic, and it doesn't feel super Mazda to me, and it just doesn't feel as nice as it could. Another interesting thing is that the driver's seat gets into a great position. I can sit low, I'm exactly where I want to be, and I'm very comfortable. And then you go over to the passenger seat, and the passenger seat does not get this low. I was sitting way up high in that passenger seat earlier on the lowest setting. And then in addition to that, the way the seat is sitting, the way the bottom cushion is, it feels like your legs are angled downward. So you always feel like you're just kind of sliding down the seat. So while the passenger seat is not great, the driver's seat is absolutely fantastic. And the last thing I want to note about styling and comfort is a very odd thing. When you look in this center console area, in this center stack area, there's a little middle seam right here, but the middle seam is off center with your flashers and your vents above it, which is very odd. The screen up top is off center on purpose, and we'll talk about that in a second, but it's odd that that seam is off center with the vents. Now we are going to talk about controls in this Mazda CX-5, and the biggest control and the biggest change in here is going to be this giant center screen. So on a standard CX-5, you will get a 12.9-inch screen, and then this is the top trim, which included with that is Mazda's largest ever screen in a car, which is 15.6 inches. And I do think this screen has a lot going for it, and we will talk about that in a second. But the first thing I want to mention is how odd it is that the home point on this screen shows a CX-5, and it's cool. When I press the brakes or when I turn on a turn signal, it shows up on the screen. But the car that's on this screen is so pixelated, it's very surprising to see such a pixelated image on there. And then you look below that car and you have your climate controls. Your climate controls do not switch positions. This is very common for automakers that are putting big screens in a car and taking away physical controls. They are putting a static bar on the bottom of the screen that you can control things with. Now, I prefer physical controls. I think a lot of people prefer physical controls, but at least if we're going to have controls as a touch screen on the screen, I am glad that it is a static bar. The thing about having a big center screen is I think a lot of people are not all about having giant tablets in the center of their cars. However, I will say, as someone who drives new cars every week that have a lot of tablets in here, it honestly makes sense. Because when we think about Mazda's old infotainment system, you could touch it, but it had a dial system to work the screen. And I find that the more we are using touch screens and smartphones, the easier it is to work touch screens and smartphones, and it actually makes those physical dial controls and things like that more distracting because it's not what we're using in our day-to-day lives. So yes, I understand complaints against giant center screens, but I also understand the value and the ease of use in them as someone who uses them all the time. Now, another interesting thing about this infotainment system that Mazda has in here is that it has Google built in. This is a really, really nice Android style system. And that Google built-in can integrate with your phone. So let's say you're not in the car, you're looking at something on Google Maps, and then you get in the car. When your phone connects to the car, Google Maps in the car will then be able to see your history and load it on here. And in addition to that, Mazda really wants people to be using voice controls in this car. That is what we've heard a lot while we've been here learning about this car. Use the voice controls, use the voice controls. And sometimes automakers will tell you, yes, please use these voice controls. And then the voice controls will be terrible and the car will not understand a word you say. But in here, the car actually understands what I'm saying, which is really cool. So I can go, hey Google, how...
You'll need an internet connection.
To do that, I need an internet connection, so you're gonna have to take my word for it. Earlier, I asked Google how many championships Jeff Gordon had won in the NASCAR Cup Series, and Google told me 4, and also told me things about other NASCAR drivers. So I can say that it did work. I asked it other things. I also asked it to adjust the temperature and things like that, and it worked pretty flawlessly. I didn't have much that it could not do. And if it couldn't do something, it was just kind of me testing the limits of it. So it was no big deal. A couple of other notes about controls. My instrument cluster will now tell me things like when the channel has been changed, and that is cool. And then on this digital instrument cluster, if I want to change it, I can just click a little button on the steering wheel and it will change my screen to what I want it to say. Another thing that I think is really interesting in this CX-5 is that Mazda wants drivers to be using the controls on the steering wheel. And I do think these buttons could be better. I think they could feel better. They feel a little plasticky. However, they are right here. They're easy to use. And Mazda wants you to be using these as the driver because, like I said earlier, this center screen is actually shifted sort of away from the driver. And that is because if it's in the center, if it's in true center, then your steering wheel is going to cover part of the screen and it's going to mess up your sight line. So the way it is right now, my steering wheel is not at all in the way of the screen, but also the way it is right now, it's further for me to reach certain controls. So the passenger has easy access to the volume right here, and I have the access to the volume right here because that is what Mazda wants me to use. My final note about controls is a weird thing that I noticed earlier today, which is if you click the camera button in this car, you have a bunch of different camera views, right? Which is fantastic. I love having different camera views. But your camera views are limited based on what you are doing. So when I was in traffic earlier in drive and I brought up those camera views, I only had options for side cameras and front cameras. It would not let me look at the rear view camera. And I know because I was trying to look at a Porsche 911 that was behind me and I couldn't bring up the rear view camera to get a better look at it for some odd reason, which I found very, very bizarre because it doesn't really do anything negative to look at a rear camera. Now let's move to driving this Mazda CX-5. And I think it's very important to go over again. This CX-5 and all the current CX-5s that are out until we get this hybrid or until anything else is announced have 187 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. That is a very slow engine for this size of vehicle. It is not fast at all. I put my foot down and not a lot happens. Also, the engine is very loud when I'm inside this car. So when I'm talking to y'all, I obviously can't have any kind of sound or radio on. Without the sound in the radio, I don't have a lot of road noise at all. I don't have a lot of wind noise at all. The inside of this car feels really nice from that perspective. But I'm going 43 miles per hour and just resting my foot on the accelerator, and it's just, it's actually kind of distracting to me while I'm talking to you. I'm almost losing my train of thought because I'm not used to it sounding that loud. And I do think that if the engine is going to be that loud for whatever reason, whatever it needs to be that loud for, there should be more sound deadening in the engine bay or sound deadening between me and the engine to where it does not drone quite that loudly. In addition to it not being super fast, The brake pedal is pretty squishy, which is common in a vehicle like this. You see a lot of commuter crossovers and commuter SUVs have a squishy brake pedal. It's not super rewarding feeling, but something that is kind of cool in this vehicle is it has something called G vectoring control, and that means when you turn in, the car will actually shift some of the power forward and some of the weight forward so that you have more feeling while you're turning that wheel. And I do think that's cool, and you can feel it working. This Mazda CX-5 feels decent in corners, but I assume a lot of people who drive this car aren't going to take it out and rip it in corners. A lot of what they're going to be doing is they are going to be driving and commuting places, and it is good at commuting as well. Mazda has a great system for lane centering and adaptive cruise control, which is where the car uses its cameras and its radar to determine where the lane lines are and keep the vehicle centered, and also determine where traffic is and speed up and slow down depending on where that traffic is. Mazda says in addition to that, you can now stop for 3 minutes without having to press resume on the adaptive cruise control. So if you're in really heavy traffic, the car can sit for a while and it will still resume when that traffic moves, pick up and get back to its pace or whatever pace it can get to without having to interfere by the driver. My favorite part of this driver assistance system, though, is something that I now look for in every new car, and that is a capacitive wheel. When you have a driver assistance system, the vehicle is going to track your eyes, and it is also going to track your hands if you have a hands-on system. And often a vehicle tracks your hands by minute little inputs into the wheel. However, if you have a capacitive wheel, it can just feel you touching it, and that is enough. And I think that is fantastic because it is so much more relaxing to just rest your hand on the wheel and not have to go like this very regularly. In addition to that, when the vehicle warns you that maybe you're not paying attention or your hands aren't off the wheel or anything like that, the beeps aren't jarring. They are a very soft, nice beep that says, hey, pay attention, and it gets your attention without just scaring you. Overall, I do like this Mazda CX-5. I think the styling is a totally fine transformation of what already exists, and I think it will be usable for a lot of people, and they will like the way it looks and drives, and they will like how comfortable it is. However, it does have some big drawbacks from a drivability perspective. Not only is the power not great at all on this 187 horsepower engine, but also whatever is making this engine so loud when I have the radio off is a little jarring while I'm trying to talk to y'all because the car is so quiet otherwise. And Mazda does a great job of making this cabin serene and making it nice to be in. And you can easily drown this out with the radio. But it is kind of odd that it's not in line with the other parts of the car, like how quiet it is in wind and with road noise. I do like this car. I think there are a few things that could really improve and elevate it super highly though. Now that we've driven the 2026 Mazda CX-5, it's time to give it a grade. Welcome to Alanis's report card. The exterior on this CX-5 is an A-. I don't like it as much as the outgoing CX-5. I think it's a little less elegant, but I think compared to its competitors, they're just a lot more angular, and this is more simple, more elegant, and prettier. The inside, the interior is an A. It's hard to complain about much in there. My really only complaint is the fact that we do not have physical climate controls, but even still, the materials are great, the screen is easy to work, it's super comfortable in there, and overall, the styling is really well thought out. The performance is a C+. I don't mind driving this car, it's totally fine, and in corners, it does decently well. However, you don't have a lot of power at all. The brake pedal is very squishy, and it's just not that driving experience that makes you go, ooh, I'm so excited to go press the gas pedal and go, because when you press the gas pedal, you don't go very fast at all. The value to me is a B plus. And when I think about the value on this vehicle, I think about the RAV4. The RAV4 does not have nearly the interior that this Mazda CX-5 has. However, it has a lot of similar technology and it's a good value and it's a hybrid. And compared to the pricing of the RAV4, you can get a pretty decent hybrid RAV4 for $40,000, which is what this CX-5 is. I just think it's not as good of a value in terms of actual driving and technology. Would I take this CX-5 on a road trip? Absolutely, I would. The lane centering assist is wonderful on this car. The capacitive wheel absolutely rocks. You can put actual adults in the back seat and they will have room. This is a great car for a road trip. And overall, it gets a B plus. I really think just having that slower engine and not having the faster option yet brought this grade down, but hopefully when that hybrid comes around, and hopefully if a turbo comes in the future, it'll feel more like the Mazda I'm used to, which is, yeah, step your foot on the gas, and you can really feel that power. The 2026 Mazda CX-5 is new, but it's not an unknown. It's a stylish commuter crossover with a nice interior and stomachable pricing, and that's what Mazda is good at. It makes sense to do things you're good at. The 2026 Mazda CX-5 is really solid. It's got good styling, it's got a really good interior, and it's just nice to be in, all of which are Mazda staples. I just hope we get another Mazda staple at some point in the future, and that is more power.